Cry It Out Loud, a podcast by Chasing the Rainbows with your host, Bernice Quisenberry.
Welcome to Cry It Out Loud, the podcast where we get real and raw about infertility, baby loss, and the journey of navigating pregnancy after loss. I'm Bernice, and here at Chasing the Rainbows, we believe in holding space for the stories that often go unheard, the raw, the painful, and the deeply personal. Because we have, experienced the unimaginable, you deserve a community that truly understands. Today, we're cracking the silence on a topic that deeply affects so many in our community, yet often doesn't receive the attention it deserves, a true infertility journey. March is a month dedicated to raising awareness around endometriosis, surrogacy, and cervical health. These crucial health issues are so important for us to shed light on, and we're honored to have Day here with us on our podcast. Day is a true survivor who faced years of an infertility struggle, unanswered questions, and dismissive doctors with incredible strength and resilience. Despite emotional exhaustion and countless challenges, Day never gave up on advocating for their health. Their story is one of courage, and by sharing it, they hope to empower others who feel isolated in their own journey. And with that, I'm honored to welcome Day to the podcast today. Day, thank you for being here and for sharing your powerful story with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And let's dive into your personal story and journey for our listeners to hear.
Okay. So starting with you just want me to run through my story?
Absolutely. Yeah. From, you and your husband meeting, what that looked like, your love story, and then, what it was like on your infertility journey for years.
So I will start back when, because I'll be 40 in May. So we'll start back when I was like 18, 19. I went to a doctor and they diagnosed me with pelvic inflammatory disease. So first I had an abnormal pap. They diagnosed me with pelvic inflammatory disease and endometriosis. And I was told by that doctor that I would never get pregnant. So I went through, I'm getting emotional.
Day. Yeah.
Cause I just talked about this in therapy, and we went through our whole EMDR back to the actual situation and worked through it. So, just
thanks
even
for taking this time.
Of course.
Yeah.
Even in that time, being 18, 19 years old, you don't really know what's happening. You don't know what's going on. You're told to listen to doctors, right?
Right.
And that they know what's best. They're the experts. So exactly. I didn't know to ask questions, or I was just down. Pretty much my whole 20s thinking, well, I'm never going to get pregnant. He told me I'm not going to get pregnant, so I guess I just won't have children. I didn't understand the process for diagnosing endometriosis, and that someone can't just tell you based on your symptoms, yes, you have it. So I know so many people go through the opposite, where they're telling their doctor they have this, and they're saying, oh, you're fine. My doctor that I had just said, you have endometriosis, you have pelvic inflammatory disease, your tubes are probably blocked, and you're never going to have kids. Which is extremely...
At 18 and 19.
Yes, it's mind-blowing that a doctor would say that.
Yeah.
And so when I met my husband, I was 29. We had been together for a year, and in October of 2015, I found out that we were pregnant. And I was like, oh my gosh, they said this wouldn't happen. So of course I was extremely nervous. But I had a gut feeling that something was wrong anyways. Not just because I've been pregnant multiple times, and we'll get there, but, it wasn't that nervous, it was a gut feeling that something really is just wrong. This is just not going to work. But we weren't trying at the time. I didn't have the proper doctors set up, all of that stuff. So they couldn't see me for an ultrasound until 10 weeks. Around 8.5 weeks, I would say I started bleeding a lot. And so they told me, just keep your appointment. There's nothing that we can do. whatever. So I showed up for the ultrasound, and it was a blighted ovum. So I knew, and then also I was told by the ultrasound technician that there just isn't a baby there. It's a fake pregnancy, essentially. Now knowing what I know,
Yes.
I know that, and knowing my body and the way my other losses have been, I know that most likely the embryo was in there and growing, and I lost it, and it got reabsorbed, because that's typically, my body doesn't get rid of pregnancies that aren't viable. So I'm sure that that's what happened, and I just didn't know because I didn't have an ultrasound until 10 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was rough.
Yes.
And I tried to make myself feel better by saying, like, well, we weren't planning this. We weren't, like, it's okay kind of thing.
Yeah. To protect yourself. Right.
Yes. Yes. And then just like thinking like, okay, well, we were able to get pregnant. That one didn't work out. We're going to we'll try like later. Right. So when I got to 33, then we got off birth control. Realized like nothing was happening. And the reason we got off of birth control was mainly because my pain had gotten so bad from the endometriosis that I had been diagnosed with or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I got off the birth control. I was off of it for over 6 months. Nothing was like, we weren't getting pregnant. So then I was like, well, okay, something's going on here. We went in, I fought to have a lap surgery for endometriosis to actually get diagnosed. So in June of 2019, I was 34 at the time. I finally got the surgery, and it was with Kaiser, and it was just someone that I think that wasn't an expert in endometriosis at all. It was just someone that had performed the surgeries there. So she went in, did the surgery. And then when I came out of surgery, she said everything looked fine. And then she said she's going to send tissue off to the lab. So when it went to the lab, it came back with endometriosis. So it was very confusing, the whole diagnosis. There was not really any explanation to it. It was everything looked fine. And so I did, like on my own research, figured out, because I couldn't get a hold of her either, because it's not a doctor that you can just call. It was stage 1, because it came back from the lab that it was endometriosis. And the nurse that I had talked to after said, well, she just cleaned everything out, so this is the best time to start trying to get pregnant. So we really started trying then. I still really didn't have any idea about what my diagnosis really was. No, like, questions.
No explanation.
Yes. I was just so lost, so confused, which is the whole thing with infertility. I feel like the whole way through.
You're like kept in the dark. I know is what it feels like. Like they're only giving you like little snippets. And I think because they don't want to overwhelm you, but really like we from these traumas just really need to be informed.
Yes. It's so frustrating, because then you're also over here trying to figure things out and not rely on Dr. Google.
Yes. And like all these things. Yes.
It's so crazy. You're like trying to put the puzzle pieces together on your own.
I know.
It's weird, because I've never seen, with like loss and infertility and all these things, I've never seen any other diagnosis or any other medical condition that people have to do so much research on their own.
Oh, I know.
It's absolutely insane.
It is. And reproductive health is really important and can affect a woman's body and a male's body. Like it needs to really be taken care of. Right. Yes,
exactly.
And the gaslighting and everything along with it, it's just awful.
Yes.
Like hormonal females, coming in. And no, we know our body's the best and we're very intuitive. I know.
Exactly. Yeah. So we went on to try for a year. Nothing happened.
Okay.
So we finally had a consultation, and that was in like May. I want to say, first consultation was in May of 2020. So things were all shut down. Everything was crazy.
Yeah.
And the funny thing, kind of funny, but the funny thing is that like we weren't married yet at this time. We didn't know if we were ever going to get married. We were just wanted to try to have kids.
Yeah.
We had gotten engaged in December of 2019. And then we were still working on trying to have a baby. And then the world shut down. And so when we finally had our consultation for infertility and for fertility treatment, essentially, we ended up doing our labs the day before our wedding, which was June. So it was June 6th was our wedding. And I'm supposed to be getting like my nails done, doing all the things for like, we were having a little quarantine wedding at my mother-in-law's house, which is a beautiful house. It was a beautiful wedding.
Yeah.
But in the middle of me doing all that, I'm running to the doctors to get lab work done. And then like, coming back.
Be a bride, which is already like overwhelming. And then to like get your lab scheduled, like be focused on babes on top of it. Oh my goodness.
Yes, it was craziness. So
with the pandemic. Whew, yeah,
it was chaos.
Yeah.
But then of course I got my labs back right after our wedding, like a week after our wedding. So the honeymoon period was cut short essentially because my labs came back not great. And they said I had a diminished ovarian reserve. And so I needed to go straight to fertility treatment. And they started me on IUIs. So I was actually like kind of excited. Someone gave me an answer, right? Because I feel like I'm not getting any answers. So someone's giving me an answer. Again, leaning on the doctor, leaning on their expertise.
Yep.
Thinking they know what they're doing.
That glimmer of hope that they're giving you, right? Like in those moments, they really are good at it, giving that to us. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we did our first IUI in like September of 2020. And it was an early loss, like what they consider a chemical pregnancy, which I consider a miscarriage.
Baby loss. Yes.
Yes, and a baby loss.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so it was devastating because it was our first one. I thought, this is it. Like, we're going to figure this out. And I was like, it worked on our first try and I was so excited. And then our HCG just kept going down. So I was devastated. And then we went on to do a second one, which didn't work at all. And then our third one worked. We got pregnant in December of 2020. I had ultrasounds every week from probably 5 weeks, like just to check because I had issues with losing my babies. And so they were pretty good. Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were pretty good about that and getting me in to make sure that I was having those. So I was having them every week from about 5 weeks. So I watched the baby grow. And then I had the NIPT test or NIPT test around 9 weeks. Everything came back great. They said it's a healthy baby boy, no chromosomal abnormalities. And then at 12 and a half weeks, I went in for an appointment and his heartbeat had stopped. And I had I had one of the monitors at home. I can't even think of a fetal, monitor.
One of those. Yes.
Yep. And so I had just heard the heartbeat a couple days prior to that. So the heartbeat stopped at 12 and a half weeks. I went in for a DNC I was probably 13 and a half weeks. They sent me home after that appointment and said, well, you're going to lose this baby. The heartbeat's not there, but we're going to have you wait it out. So they sent me home to see if I would if my body would naturally eliminate. You have to think the baby at that time is what? Like the size of a lime?
Yes.
Yes. And you want me to process that at home on my own?
Yes. Yes. And expected to in a toilet.
Yes.
How is this okay?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I know. Oh, dang.
Crazy. And so my body doesn't get the only loss that my body has ever recognized and naturally got rid of was the one that was really early. That was like that they considered the
first one. Yeah, that you went through. Wow, Day. So I mean, needing assistance and things because infections and everything that can happen to you, and it's just the seriousness of this because it's a trauma and Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was crazy. So after a week, finally, I called them. I'm like, nothing is happening.
A week.
And so they got me in for a DNC.
Bleeding and everything, right, Day? Like it's all of it happening. Sorry, trigger warning for anyone listening who, has dealt with any type of baby loss. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh,
so they finally got me in for the DNC.
yeah.
And they sent the fetus out for testing afterwards, and everything came back normal again.
Wow.
So they did a recurrent pregnancy loss panel on me. They said that was normal. They literally had 0 answers for me. 0.
Oh my gosh.
Just it happens.
That is so frustrating in those moments, because now you've lost 4 babies and you're normal. Like this isn't normal.
Yeah. No, not normal.
Not normal.
No. So we gave like my body a break a little bit, and then we went into doing more IUIs. So we did 3 more, I think. One was like, even with Menopur, like injections, like we tried all the things and we weren't getting pregnant again.
Yeah.
So I was like, forget this, because that had all been with one clinic. So we went to a different clinic. And by the way, I should mention that the clinic that we had done all the IUIs with, that doctor told me that IVF was not an option for me because my reserve was low. That I needed, if I wanted to do IVF, I would need to use donor eggs and go straight to donor eggs. And I was like, well, like we've been able to get pregnant. Like that can't be the only answer.
Exactly. Good for
And
you.
so, yes. So I was like, I'm going to look around. So I went to another doctor, and she said to do IVF with my own eggs. So we were going to try that. And while we were literally on the list waiting to start the stimulation medication the following month, we got pregnant spontaneously. And it was like a miracle that we just got pregnant, and it was twins. And so I went in for the first ultrasound, and one twin was already gone. And so there was just the empty sac there. The other one had a heartbeat. And so we followed up on it. I mean, at this point, then the doctors were concerned. So my OBGYN, they had me, I was at Kaiser. So they have like a specialty area for what's it called? High risk.
Okay.
So they had me in that department. So I was getting ultrasounds like constant. I mean, sometimes twice a week because they were just watching everything. And the baby had a heartbeat for a few weeks, and then the heartbeat stopped on that one too. So I lost both babies in that pregnancy.
Okay.
And again, that one, I didn't want to do another DNC. And so they gave me the pill to take because my body doesn't let go of the pregnancies on their own. But because they didn't do the DNC, they said they couldn't test the baby and stuff. So they had 0 answers for me again. We took a long break on that one before we returned, and I went to a different clinic and started IVF with them. And so we did, my first round of IVF actually got canceled because I did injections for 19 days. My follicles were like barely growing. It was a whole mess. And so after 19 days and $10,000 on medication, it got canceled.
It's draining, like not just the emotional and physical, mental drain, but also financial, and that's a whole other thing when you're trying to navigate this and, taking out from everywhere you can.
Yes. It's extremely defeating. Like the emotional, the financial, everything, the toll on your body. It's just a lot. Being on that medication, there's women that go through IVF and they have to go be on the injections for like 8 days or something, and it's hard on them. And so for being on it for 19 days is just, it was horrible.
I know. I couldn't imagine.
Yeah. And still no answers. So they were like, okay, well, we're just going to switch the protocol up. So they did. We did another round. And I don't even remember how many eggs. I've done this so many times now that I don't remember numbers, but I know that I didn't get, I think we had one embryo and they tested it because I was told that I should do testing because of my losses, which still, now that I think back on it, doesn't make any sense because the one that made it to the 12 and a half weeks tested normal. So what does it, like, it's not that it's a chromosomal issue. It may have been on a couple of them or whatever, but we know for sure one had no chromosomal abnormalities.
Exactly.
So I'm spending an extra $4,000 for testing.
On top of, you just did 2 rounds, so that's 10,000 each. That's 20,000. So now we're talking 24,000 in that brief period. And because of you being emotional and hormonal and all of the things, because we are during those times and injections and hormones and everything that we're injecting, then they say, and we're like, yes, we'll do anything to have our babies. So let's do this. But that's ridiculous. Yeah, Day.
Yeah. It's crazy. And so it was one embryo that they sent out for testing that cost that amount, and it came back abnormal. And the thing with when it comes back abnormal, then they won't transfer it for you. But if I didn't test it, they would have transferred it and tried to see if it worked. So then we had to go into another round of IVF. It just kept going. So I did 4 rounds of IVF before I had one test normal. And then I had one that was low level mosaic. So there were some abnormalities there. So I had those 2 embryos. So we decided to transfer the mosaic one first and see what happened. So we transferred her and she stuck around. And then we had a heartbeat and everything. We made it to 8.5 weeks and her heartbeat stopped. So we were at another loss. And mind you, they're not really, they didn't change much up when we went to transfer the normal one. Nothing is mentioned to me any of this time about endometriosis. Nothing.
So nothing's really discussed. Like right now, you're just thinking, we're just trying this to get pregnant because of my ovarian reserve. They said I have a low one. This is why we're doing all of this. Like they're not discussing your overall health, like other things. Like they're not talking to you about like diet, like what are you eating to help, like those kind of things. Like nothing from a holistic perspective, right, Day?
Yes, nothing like that.
Supplements, like, I mean, as in like vitamins and minerals that you could be taking, like natural things, like none of that's being discussed, right, at this point?
Nope, just prenatals. And I think that they had me on CoQ10 to help with like egg quality, but I mean, just the bare minimum. Nothing else is discussed. And I have just put my faith in the doctors.
As we were taught, growing up, we're taught to, like, you know, just brush things under the rug, or, you know, the suck it up club, and also like authority, like those, you know, they're the subject matter experts. We need to take what they say as gold. And no, we want to ask questions. We want deeper understanding, because doctors are human too. And they only know what they're taught in medical school. So, you know, and their continuing education. So how can like we dive into this deeper and like really explore, right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like, and so I at that point I hadn't really started I mean, I had kind of looked up stuff. I was sharing stuff kind of on Instagram. So I was part of the community and seeing what other people were doing. But I was told, okay, well, now you have this normal embryo. So we're going to transfer this one. The mosaic one stuck. So this one is like, should work, right?
Yeah.
So we did the transfer and the embryo didn't stick at all. So now we're 4 rounds. I had already done 6 IUIs, 4 rounds of IVF, and now we are empty-handed. Like we have no baby, no embryos frozen, no anything. I mean, at this point, I don't even $100,000 in the hole for doing all of this stuff.
Oh my goodness, $100,000. That's a house, you know,
yes.
like it.
Yeah. Yes. The emotional toll. And then not to mention the hormones. No one said anything to me about, and obviously, you know, just as a woman, how hormones can change your body. But no one said to me, oh, you're going to be on these stimulation, the hormones, this heavy amount of hormones, and your body's going to change a lot.
Yes.
No one said that.
No.
So I gained probably 50 pounds. I was extremely uncomfortable. I was extremely inflamed. I mean, like I felt like if someone poked me, I was going to pop.
Like a bloated tick is what I used to say, right, Day?
Yes.
Is that what you like? You just,
you
can't like put anything down. Like,
it was so frustrating. And I just felt I was so emotional. There was just so many issues. So finally, I went to another doctor. Yeah. We did 2 rounds of IVF with him before we got a normal embryo. So at this point, that was 6 rounds of IVF, right? Yeah. We got a normal embryo, but I'm gonna try to figure this out. So I started working with a naturopath. They figured out that my CRP was high, which is your marker for inflammation. It's supposed to be less than 3. Mine was 11. Which they were like, that is insane. Like the naturopath was like, I'd never had a patient with one that high. And she's like, and it's from the hormones that you've been on. Like being on that level of medication will cause all of this. My A1C. What is that
doing to your body, right? Like they did not like go over those warnings, nothing until you get to homeopathic. Yeah.
Yes. My A1C was off. I'm now pre-diabetic. All of these things that was like, what? Like, and I mean, I eat healthy. I am I exercise, all these things. I had zero control over it because it's hormonal. Like, what were you going to say? Sorry.
Just 10 rounds within 4 years, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Talking and then you're also going past, like the 5 or 10 day mark. You're going to 19 in some of your treatments, that like really extensive too. Like, and I would, being desperate, wanting to have children, I'll do anything, go to any length. And so like, but not knowing what's going on behind this, until now, geez.
Yeah. And it's like, and you don't know what you don't know. And you don't know what to really ask for. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for like talking about it, if you can. There's people, obviously, I get that people have different levels of what they can handle, what they want to put out there, different levels of vulnerability that they're comfortable with.
Absolutely.
But I feel like sharing my journey has helped so much with people just kind of saying, hey, that happened to me. This is what I had. This is what I did. I don't know if that would help you, but this is what I just want to let you know that this is what I looked into. And that helped so much. That's what led me to the naturopath in the first place. Wow. So it wasn't a doctor saying, go to see someone.
No. It really is talking to a community. It's talking to our Instagram community. It's talking to our Chasing the Rainbows community. It's getting in a room with other survivors who are actively going through this or have been through it to hear what they did, words of advice, things that they advocated for, things that they brought up with their doctor. It's all of that when you're getting this level of care, because this is a very intricate process and you have to trust that doctor you're working with, because your life and your baby's life are in their hands. Yes. And so asking all of those crucial questions, Day, and having someone like you with a strong voice to advocate for infertility survivors, anyone going through any kind of journey with this, is huge.
Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Yes. I feel so strongly about that. I've made connections with so many people, and there's people that reach out to me a lot that have no one else to talk to because they don't share it in their personal life. Yes. Because they can't. They feel like they can't because they wouldn't have the support and it would just tear them down. And so I have people that reach out to me for every appointment that they go to say, I went to my appointment and this happened. They have no one else to tell. I've made amazing connections with people that way.
Yeah,
for sure.
I know. Oh, Day.
Yeah. So the naturopath, we started working on some stuff to lower my inflammation, I was on metformin for my A1C and stuff like that to try to help those things. This doctor at least was the first one to say, oh, you have endometriosis. Let's put you on a suppression protocol to try to transfer this embryo, because no one had done that before. Like, what? Yes. So we
For
did.
your body to accept like that, like it's.
Yes.
I know.
The first, but there was still a disconnect with the rest of my body regulating itself. So we did transfer that embryo and it didn't work. And I think after that, that was the last transfer that we did. It was actually on my 39th birthday last year.
Oh,
and it
man.
didn't work. And I do want to point out too how hard it is to also lose an embryo that hasn't even been planted yet. You have so much connection to it, especially when you've done the genetic testing, because regardless, it's hard anyway, but the sex of the baby. So it becomes like you have this picture of your little baby boy, and you have all the things that you connect with that baby already. Like, okay, what am I going to do with their nursery? What am I going to do? I mean, you have plans for them already that you emotionally connect to.
100%. And since you were a little child, like we thought about building our family, we thought about having children, like we've talked about it, and like when I grow up, I'm going to do this and have this family and live in this house and, all those things. And then, yes, this is devastating. It's a baby.
Yes.
And it is a baby loss after baby loss, month after month in infertility. And it's just like brushed to the side, and it's not. It is devastating. It just rocks your whole world and takes over.
Extremely traumatic.
Traumatic, yes.
And it's years of trauma. It's not just
PTSD, just re-traumatizing. It's one of those times that, you're going to have to keep reliving your traumas to try to get pregnant and, in life.
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So we lost that embryo. That was the last one we had. I took some time off to try to do some things, like I did NAD, IVs, all these things to try to help. And we went in and did one more round of IVF, and we got one embryo and it came back abnormal. And it was a trisomy 18, which is really there's a lot of abnormal embryos that I would have liked to transfer to just give it a shot. But the trisomy 18 is one that your body doesn't recognize that this isn't a healthy pregnancy. The baby can make it, and they usually die. Like if they make it to birth, they usually pass away in that first year of life. And I'm like, I can't knowingly do that to myself and to the baby.
Yeah.
So we closed the chapter on IVF after that. 7 rounds, 3 transfers, no baby in my arms. And I was devastated because you think that's going to be the answer. Every new doctor I had, it was like, well, you're going to do this. And they tell you with such certainty in them, like they're going to be the one that fixes this, but they don't give you any answers. They don't look any deeper. They just think, they give you kind of a cookie cutter approach a lot of the times. Like this is just the generic approach to things.
Checking. Yep.
Yes.
Check boxes. Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
And finding a good doctor is very hard. Yeah.
It is. And so we closed that chapter, but I went back to a naturopath that specializes in fertility. And because I was like, we found answers before. And I felt like I didn't have time to fix all those things that they were finding that were wrong before we did the transfers and stuff, because I felt really rushed through the process, because it was kind of like, oh yeah, those things, right, your A1C is high, sugar levels might be off a little bit, but it'll be fine. That's what I felt like I was getting from Western medicine, when really that's not it. I went and researched myself and started looking into things, and the spikes in your glucose can cause implantation failure. It can cause miscarriages. The inflammation markers, with my inflammation being that high. And it's like, what's the reason for the inflammation being that high? It probably has a lot to do with my endometriosis too.
Yes. It's all connected.
Yes. Yes. There's so many things that I wish, hindsight, right? I wish that I would have thought, okay, let's really try to get to the bottom of this and figure this out before we keep moving forward with IVF. But you're not. You're listening to the experts, to the doctor saying, oh no, we can go ahead and do this. This is gonna work. Like, I don't know. So you don't keep digging.
I know.
It's so frustrating.
It is.
So frustrating. So now I'm with a naturopath who has been amazing. We've lowered my CRP, the inflammation marker, from 11 down to 5, which is great. So we're getting into the normal territory. My A1C went from like 5.8 being pre-diabetic all the way down to 5.3, and I'm way like in the normal range now. All of these things that I so wish when I was going through the IVF process that I had done this stuff first. And if a doctor would have just said, like, all of those markers can contribute to the success of an embryo transfer and a success of IVF. Like, you need to make sure that these are all under control. Most likely, one of those embryos, I would have a baby from them.
Wow, Day. Like, and you sharing this, sharing like any like guidance and advice and things like that for our listeners is huge, because you're taking your pain and everything that you've been through just to help those that are really going through it, and maybe change or help change their outcome if they're listening to this, or they were questioning things, or they're feeling defeated, or they're in this journey now. What can they advocate for? What can they go about doing? Because honestly, too, we feel like a pressure cooker in this, because our eggs are on a timer. They're, a lot of them are only comfortable up until, I hate even saying it, like 40 or whatever, or 45. And it's just like, what is this, And that's not fair to us, when realistically, if we are doing the homeopathic ways, we can go a lot longer with fertility. Isn't that something?
Yes.
That's not touched on.
Yes. And that was part of the problem with when I closed the book on IVF. It was just it was the end of this last year. And so I'm turning 40 in May. And I was so depressed, because I'm getting to that age where they say that this isn't going to happen.
Yes.
And so the doctor, the naturopath I'm working with, is like, no, we can do this. And so I was like, I'm determined. I want this baby. And so I went to another fertility doctor as well, to have a team.
Yes.
And that's one piece of advice that I would want to give people, is really keep searching for the right doctor, because
do not settle.
No. And so I found a doctor now that I sat down, and in the consultation, he said, so tell me your story. And so I went through the story, and he asked questions along the way, and he said, okay, I'm going to give you my opinion now. Are you ready? And I said, yeah. And he said, I don't think you need IVF. I think you can do this naturally. And to have a fertility doctor say that.
Yes. And not be worried about the money.
Yes. IVF is their bread and butter. Yes. And you feel like you get pushed to IVF or to donor eggs or something that's like ridiculously expensive. That they're telling you this is going to work. You don't know if it's actually going to work. I went through 7 rounds and came out with empty arms.
Yes.
And to have a fertility doctor say, without me even asking, do you think we can do this naturally? He said on his own, I think you can do this naturally. He said, you're just going to need the support once you're pregnant. We want to make sure that as soon as you get a positive pregnancy test, you call our office, and we're going to get you set up with the right protocols so that we can try to make sure that this is successful. And how amazing for a doctor, because usually I feel like fertility doctors aren't really willing to help you unless they're the ones that got you pregnant. And he's saying you can do this on your own, and we're here to support you once it happens.
We're your team.
Yes.
We are truly in your corner and supporting you regardless of how we go about this, in your best interest.
Yes.
And he listened. 12 minutes, 8 to 12, like you sit there and talk to someone, they actually feel validated and heard. And then you really dive into them personally and not just checking boxes.
Yep. Exactly.
How much did that do for you, Day? How much did that just change the journey that you were on?
I cried. I literally just started crying, because it was just like, oh my goodness. And I had this feeling since I closed the chapter on IVF. Yes, I went through this depression about it and the grief of letting that go too. Yes. But I also felt in my gut, I think we've been pregnant. We've gotten pregnant even on our own. Like, I think we can do this. And no doctor is saying that, but I think we can do this. And so to have my naturopath and then have this fertility doctor say that, it was like validating. And it felt like, okay, they have faith in this. So I have more faith in myself that we can make this happen.
Yes.
So.
And that is just extremely important. And to dive into it, just to because you feel so invested in infertility when you're in it, because you already spent $100,000, right? And then you're like, what's another 10 to do another round of IVF, and just keep going, because and it's hard to have a stop, right? And then for you to close that chapter, right? Oh my goodness. And uncovering all of that trauma and just PTSD, everything for years.
Yes.
And then to find a doctor who actually listens and puts you on what you already were feeling this whole time. You knew in your gut, in your body, and that there was something going on, but as long as you address what's going on, then you can do this. Finally.
Yes. Yeah. So I finally felt like, yes, we're to a good place. I literally cried. And every time that I talked about it afterwards, I went and I told my coworkers and I told all the people, because I was so excited. And every time I talked about it, I started crying, and then they'd start crying with me. And we're not even pregnant yet. Just the idea of that, I have the support system and I have answers and I have someone to reach out to when something comes up that can help me get the answers.
Yes.
And he even was so especially with the loss where I had the DNC at 13 weeks. And when I was telling him that, and he's like, and what answer did they give you? And I'm like, none. They literally said, everything came back normal.
Wow.
We don't know what to tell you. And he said, that's not okay. They should have had answers for you. And I'm like, and he's just looking at my records, he can't tell, he's like, they should have tested more. They should have done this. They should have found an answer for you. And that was validating too, that I'm not just crazy.
Yes, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unlucky. I was ignored.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
Yep. And it goes all the way back to, and this is what I was just talking to my therapist about in therapy last week, was the first appointment that I had with that doctor when I was 18 or 19, just telling me that I have endometriosis, and with no real reason. I don't even know what symptoms I told him, that he just came up with these things, and then to tell me that it's just never going to happen. It goes all the way back to then of doctors just giving you misinformation. I know sometimes they're not doing it purposely, but it's
multiple. It's not just one day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? This has been an ongoing experience, and I know I've experienced it, and so many other survivors in support group, because, our loss is the cherry on top. It's all the things underneath too that goes so much deeper, and all those secondary losses, and just continual.
Yes. So I'm finally feeling good in where we are in our journey. I feel like we have answers. We've working on fixing my body. I feel amazing, physically. My inflammation's down. I don't feel like I'm gonna pop anymore. and that's what I say. Even if, I have faith that this is going to happen. I think I'm on the right path finally. But even if, God forbid, for some reason that it did not, me feeling the way I feel right now and feeling back to I don't have all that discomfort.
Yes.
I'm not pre-diabetic anymore. And all these things that we've worked on fixing is worth all of going through, with the naturopath and working with this doctor.
Yes. So. And it's so healing too, right? When you are taking care of yourself and things, because I know for myself, during, infertility journey and things like that, I hated my body and resented it almost. So to have, your body going back to doing what it should be doing, kind of thing, based on finally getting the right support and supplements that you need. Yes.
Yes, exactly.
Huge.
And having that, it gives you faith back in your body, because you get to where you're so mad at your body. Why aren't you working? Why are you doing this to me? Yes. It's so frustrating. But having that, working on healing and the self-care and taking care of myself, really, I feel I have faith in my body that we can do this. Like, I can do this.
Yes. Yes. Oh, and when you look in the mirror, it's like, yes, we got this. Like, it does. It helps so much.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many things here. Like, I know, would love to have you back on again. Just some topics. It's like, yes, like we could really dive into so much more, but we are running out of time. So I would love to share, though, the doctors that you used, if anybody else is out West Coast or anything like that. We're, always looking for good ones to recommend and things like that for listeners. But, your story isn't just about infertility, but it's the power of self-advocacy and the importance of listening to your body. And they thank you for the, just really showing the emotional toll that, can be so dismissed by the system, and, what's supposed to be and things like that. And for sharing your raw, real and emotions, through this journey. It just means so much to not feel alone in those moments. So at Chasing the Rainbows, we see you, we believe in you, and we are here to fight alongside you. So if you're looking for support, resources, or a community that understands, please visit chasingtherainbows.org or join our daily support groups too, just from our website. And if this conversation is hitting home, please share it, because the more we speak about it, the harder it becomes to ignore. So until next time, take care, and remember, your voice matters.